missing one person. Oh, no, I was counting with the students.
Okay. So go ahead and sign in before you guys come on in, but welcome, sign in, grab a snack, grab a chair. We'd like to get started, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jackie Ponciano-Babb. I'm the program lead for the Sport and Recreation Management here at DVC. And I'm happy to be with you today and have a chance to introduce you to our guest speaker. Dr. Williams is an associate professor of kinesiology and interim director of January term at St. Mary's College. She teaches in both the undergraduate and graduate programs, where she teaches a variety of classes in sport and recreation management, sport law, facility and event management, and women in sport. Her research includes the marketing of female athletes and women's sportswear. We have several of you who already know what your educational path and potential major, but many of you might still be undecided on what to pursue. We hope that you'll keep an open mind during this presentation. Dr. Williams is here to share her knowledge and expertise in sports and recreation management and how to get there. Please help me welcoming Dr. Claire Williams.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm not so formal as Dr. Williams. I tend to go by Professor Williams, but you can call me Claire, whatever you prefer. But I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I love to talk about sport management, and I'm hoping through the presentation that you'll learn a little bit about how you might find yourself or see yourself in the world of sport management. Because it's a huge industry, I think, and we'll talk about this. We think about it fairly narrowly in terms of professional sports, college sports, what that might look like, but there's really so many ways to enter into the industry, so that's part of what I want you to take away from today. There's a lot that I'm gonna cover. If you have questions at any point, please just let me know. I'm happy to answer them. I'll save time at the end for questions if something comes up though, but don't hesitate just to interrupt. Okay, so this is the agenda. It's up here on the side too, so just a little bit about me to start and how I got here. What is sport management itself? Some fascinating historical highlights. We might say history is boring and dull, but not this history. It'll be fun. Some career opportunities. We'll talk about potential for earning a bachelor's degree and where you might do that. We'll talk about internships. We'll talk about graduate school, which maybe is not on your radar at all, but now it should be. And then some career characteristics, just so you know what you're getting into. And then if we have time, some trends in the industry in terms of research and sort of some other industry trends. Okay, so a little bit just about me so you know how I came to be in this space. So I am originally from Portland, Oregon. I went to a public school in downtown Portland. I am a lifelong soccer player, minus the last 10 years. I guess I retired, but I played all throughout my childhood. I played in high school, and then I picked up track and field in high school as well. So when I was thinking about, like, where do I want to go to college, I knew that I wanted to, if possible, to play sports. So I ended up at Smith College, which is a small school, about 2,800 students in Western Massachusetts, Division III. I was able to play play soccer. I ran indoor track and I ran outdoor track during my 4 years there. So I was really able to kind of maximize my student athlete experience while also going to school. I was a political science major. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up at all. I just sort of landed in the major based on, I don't know, some of the classes looked pretty interesting. In my senior year though, I took a sports sociology class and I was able to do an independent study specifically related to Title IX. And I found the academic study of sport. And I was like, oh, right, I love being an athlete and I could study this thing. So you all are, again, years ahead of where I was at that point. So I kind of found that space and it was sort of in the back of my mind of like, what could I do with this thing? So after graduation, I was able to get an internship with the Women's Sports Foundation in New York. So I was able to do advocacy work for the first time for girls and women in sport. So one of my sort of through lines is like the type of experiences that I had as a female athlete in high school, wearing the hand-me-downs from the boys in terms of uniforms. So even that would have been the late 90s, kind of facing some of those things that have been going on for years. So at the Women's Sports Foundation, I was able to do an internship and start to be exposed to at least one part of the sports industry. After that, I needed a job, right? That happens. And so I moved to Boston. The job that I got was being a middle school PE teacher. I had no training in being a teacher or a physical educator. To say the least, it was horrible, and I did a super disservice to those students. While I was teaching PE though, I also was working for a nonprofit organization called the Boston Youth Sports Initiative, which is kind of an umbrella organization that was organizing resources for other nonprofits in Boston that were focused on serving youth through sport. So got another little taste of the sports industry from that perspective. While I was there, I decided that I was ready to go back to grad school, or go to grad school for the first time, and to study sport, sort of take that opportunity to see what does it look like to actually study this academically. I landed at Ohio State and took classes in sport sociology, sport history, sport philosophy. I got a graduate minor in women and gender studies, so I was able to kind of bring that through line of the experiences of women and girls in sports into my academic study. And I also started taking classes in sport management, and I fell in love with the business side of what is happening in terms of the sports industry. So while I was at Ohio State, also I had an opportunity to teach, and I was like, oh, I actually do like teaching. I just don't like those teaching middle schoolers so much. I really like the college environment. So after I finished my degree, I needed a job again, it turns out, and a job opened at St. Mary's. I knew I wanted to be back on the West Coast, close to my family. I knew I wanted to be at a small school if I could, and at St. Mary's, I am the coordinator of our undergraduate sport and recreation management students, so I have that piece. I also get to teach our women in sport class, and we have a January term program where students take one course for the month of January, and faculty can teach whatever we want. So I was able to take my interest in sport and sexuality, and I taught a class in January term along those lines. Also at St. Mary's, something that I do is I advise our undergraduate students, including transfer students. So students who transfer into St. Mary's are connected right away with a faculty advisor in their major, and we set up a path to graduation. So that's one of the things that I also do as well, that I also really enjoy. Okay, so enough about me. Sport management. So when you think about sport management, and perhaps when you describe sport management to friends, family, if you're interested at all, how do you describe that to them? What do you say? Okay, what is sport management?
Don't be shy.
Don't have name tags on it, I can't call you out easily. No wrong answers. Where's our starting place? How do you describe what you think sport management is? Go ahead.
Say like the business aspect of it.
Absolutely, the business aspect. So what, do you have an idea of what that means, or an example of what that means?
Like coordinating teams maybe.
Okay, good. Coordinating teams or supporting a team specifically. Good. How else or how differently might we define sport management? Or other examples of what you think might be included? Yeah.
It probably also involves like budgeting for resources and stuff for like what a team needs.
Yeah, absolutely. How do we have all these things? How do we have players who get salaries? How do we have staff who support? Absolutely, that goes into budgeting. Good. So let's look at 3 different definitions and we'll kind of add to what we've started with. Okay, so the first way we think about sport management is a multidisciplinary field that integrates the sport management, the sports industry and management. So we think about the sports industry, anything that you can think of that includes sports, whatever, right? So that piece of it, right? So that's one of the ways we get so big, is married with management. So in this concept, or in this definition of management, we want to think about management as planning, organizing, leading, and evaluating. So if we want to think about, for example, the Men's World Cup, right? It's going to start in T-minus 11 days, I think. So in terms of planning, right, we're in 2022. Anybody have a guess on when Qatar was awarded the World Cup, Men's World Cup? Like in what year? How many years out have they known that this event is going to start in 11 days? Guesses? 8. Say it again? How many years ago? Ish? 8-ish? 8-ish? 10-ish? Well, your good guess is 12 years ago. So in 2010, they bid and they got the Men's World Cup. So they have been planning, right, for 12 years to have this big event, right? They've constructed stadiums, they've figured out ticketing, they have kind of figured out housing, right? They're bringing cruise ships because they don't have enough places for everybody to sleep, right? But that's part of the planning, right? 12 years out for a mega sporting event. Organizing, let's go back to thinking about ticketing. Well, we have to have tickets, so what are they gonna cost? How are we gonna distribute them? Do we distribute them to the host country first? Do we distribute them to participating countries? When do they go on sale to the world at large? So that's, and then distributing, how do people actually get their tickets? Are we gonna do electronic distribution, paper distribution, right? All of those little details go into making that event happen. In terms of leadership, we wanna think about what types of leadership might be appropriate for different situations. So we could think about being a transformational leader, right? Getting everybody on board with our ideas, going and moving in the same direction, right? That might be a really good leadership style for a particular moment. We might also need to be more of a dictator, like we gotta do this now and fast because the thing is tomorrow. So figuring out, again, what are the different leadership styles and how we can incorporate that into maybe the event we're planning. And then the evaluation piece. How are things going, right? At the end of this World Cup, I hope, right? There's a big group together that says, this went well, this didn't go well, how can we do this better for the next time, right? And then that knowledge can be passed along. There's also gonna be, right, micro moments of evaluation as well, right? Day by day, match by match. What went well? How was the crowd management? For example, how do the referees do, right? This is a practice of referees right after the game. They're gonna do video analysis. Did they get this call? Did they miss that call? Right, so all of this then is incorporated into management components in conjunction with the sports industry. The next definition we might think about is the process of satisfying sports consumers' wants, needs, and desires. So a lot of what we do in sport management is think about spectators, right? In terms of spectator sports, we might also think about participatory sports like a marathon, for example. But what is it that the consumers want? What do they need, and how do we satisfy those? And then how do we develop needs? So random example, if we think about a smartphone, however many years ago at this point, I don't know, 15 years ago, people did not realize they needed, it's not even 10 years ago, right? We didn't even realize we needed to have smartphones in front of our face all the time, right? And now we're like, how do we exist, right? Yesterday morning, I misplaced mine. I'm like, I don't know, what do I do? Where do I go? Do I go back home? Do I look for it? What do I do, right? But 10 years ago, we didn't know we needed that thing. So part of what we do also in this industry is think forward. What is it that we think people need or want to enhance their experience? And then finally, going back to our initial definition, very simply the business of sport, right? The behind the scenes, everything that goes into the finances, the planning, the organizing to make sporting events happen. I have up here other examples of representations of the sports industry because sport itself has a very specific definition. Maybe you talked about this in your introduction to kinesiology class, but there's a difference between sport, athletics, games, and play. When we think about the business of sport, I want us just to think as broadly as possible. So primarily, right, we're probably gonna think about pro sports. We're gonna think about college sports at its different levels. But I want us also to think about a whitewater rafting company, or a 24-hour fitness, or a yoga studio, or whatever, right? All of those things sort of come underneath this giant umbrella of sport management. Okay, how big is this industry, do you think? Yeah, no wrong answers, we just need a starting place. Green chip pack. Tell me, what do you think? Where should we start? How big is the industry?
I don't know. I'd just say really big.
Really big? Okay. Give me a number. What do you think is really big?
Like definitely in the millions.
Absolutely. Excellent starting place. Let's go up. Where can we go from millions? And many millions, right? We said big, so
Yeah.
many millions. Good. Yankees fan over there. What do you think?
I would say that, it's billions.
Billions, okay. I like it. Let's go up. How many billions are we talking? What do we think? 70 billion. I like it. Let's go up. 70 billion, right? How much did the Raiders Stadium cost?
Ooh.
1.8 billion, right? So Raiders Stadium, right? 1.8 billion. So we got to go up. Give me something else, and then I'll give you the answer. $620 billion, right? This is a ginormous industry. And you can see, right, the cost of one stadium, $1.8 billion, it adds up really fast, right? Once we start thinking about money spent on advertising, salaries, gambling, right? Construction, like everything that goes into it, this is a huge industry. Again, coming back to my point, there is a space for anyone in the industry, right, if you want to be there. Okay, so let's look at some historical highlights as a way to kind of understand sport management, and then also some of the things that we talk about in relation to the management of sports. So we're starting in the 1960s. So for any historians ever, they would say 1960s not really history, right? That's not actually that long ago. But in terms of sport management as an academic discipline, that's where we start. So we obviously had the management of sport a long time ago in terms of gladiators, right, going way back in the day. In terms of the academic study of sport, though, we get to the 1960s. So in 1966, we have the first sport management program was established at Ohio University. So if you think about how long people have been studying English, philosophy, history, right, for centuries, right? So we're a very new academic discipline, which means there's lots of holes in the research and lots of things we don't yet know, which is a really exciting time and exciting space to be in. Okay, also in 1966, the first naming rights were granted to Bush Memorial Stadium in St. Louis, right? So if you picture, right, naming rights across a big facility. So not uncommon today, in fact, super common. Why would Bush Memorial Stadium or Chase Bank or Oracle, why would they pay to have their name on a facility? Advertisement, absolutely. And in what ways do we advertise? Who's you asked? What is that? Give me an example of what you mean by, like, what does that look like in terms of advertising?
Seeing like a logo anywhere with their name, like things every day, so billboards,
Yep, absolutely. Good. Right, so then we have this affiliation between the team and the facility, right, and all billboards, right, where you name it, right? There becomes a very close association between the naming rights, right? Let's roll with Chase Bank, $300 million for a 20-year deal. So Chase Bank pays the Warriors $15 million to have their name on the Chase Center. So $15 million gets them advertising, right? This is not, we might say, oh, it's free, right, in some ways, because now it's on these advertising things, in the newspaper where the Warriors playing, Chase Center, event at Chase Center, right? We can say that's free, but it's not really, right? It's $15 million. Okay, so advertising, why else? Why, for example, why wouldn't Chase Bank pay I live in Oakland, why wouldn't Chase Bank pay $15 million to my local library? Chase Center, Lakeshore Library. What's different between sports and them? Teeny tiny library, for example. Yeah.
It has like a much larger audience and it's gonna be more publicized, like you said, it would be like in the newspaper or in the news, like they're gonna talk about Chase Center all the time.
Good.
Basketball maybe.
Yeah, right, they're not talking about my local library as much as I would love them to. Yeah, how about, you have another answer?
I was gonna pretty much say the same thing, at least for like basketball, it's played, well, for Chase Center, it's played all over the United States, so that means it gets out to the entire United States instead of just like the Bay Area.
Yep, absolutely, and not just the United States, right? NBA in particular has moved international, right? The Warriors have a huge presence in China, for example, right? The Warriors, the NBA, many of the North American professional sports leagues have decided the US is saturated. Like, how many more fans can we get of X, Y, or Z team? Let's go to China where there's 1.4 billion people. Let's go to India where there's 1.4 billion people, right? There's a whole lot more potential fans than 350 million people we have in the United States, for example. How do we feel about sports? Do we generally like them or not like them? No matter what you feel about the Warriors in particular. Do we generally like sports? Yeah, right, generally we actually, not just like, generally we like, love them, right? We have these really strong feelings. So the idea behind these naming rights is A, it's income or revenue for the Warriors, but then Chase is gonna put out $15 million a year for what's called the halo effect. We feel really good about the Warriors, again, unless you don't like the Warriors, right? Generally, we really love the Warriors. If you think about a halo, we feel really then good about Chase Bank, right? That's the idea, right? We're again, we're putting these two concepts together so we feel better about Chase Bank, and ideally, right, we become customers of Chase Bank because of their affiliation. So this is why, again, it's a source of income for the team itself, but then the companies then have this really strong affiliation with the sports team, again, which we generally speaking feel good about. Okay, so that was in the 1960s. So we get to the 1970s. Billie Jean King founded the Women's Sports Foundation. Maybe not surprising that I have that there as a historical event, considering an intern there, but I have this here because Title IX was passed in 1972, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in educational institutions that receive federal financial assistance. So 1972, in essence, we have a law that says actually women kind of like to play sports too, and you can no longer say that they cannot play at your school. So prior to 1972, 1% of athletic budgets were spent on women in intercollegiate spaces. Right? We're still not equal now in terms of women and men in intercollegiate spaces, but it's a whole lot better. Before 1972, 300,000 girls played high school sports. Now we have 3.4 million girls playing high school sports. So we have this moment in time that really brings in half of the population to more sports participation. In 1979, ESPN was launched. Why is that significant? What was ESPN the first to do? Anybody know? What were they the first?
I have no idea if this
Yes.
is accurate, but were they like the first channel to like focus primarily on sports and have that be like their main thing?
And do it 24/7. So again, if you can remember or imagine, pre this time, we have a game of the week, right? A Sunday night baseball game, a Monday night football game, for example. Like one game, right, of those major professional leagues. Like can you imagine what the world looked like, right? What did people do? I have no idea what they did with their time. ESPN comes on the scene, puts sports on TV, which means they need content, right? So then all of a sudden we have more sports on TV, right? So the commercialization factor of sports goes through the roof, right? And ESPN, we know, I can't list all their stations, but they have ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN Deportes, ESPN Plus, ESPN3, all the things, right? Say it.
ESPN News.
Yes, precisely, right? All of these platforms, and they need content, right? So then they're gonna go out and get that content from various leagues and other places. Okay, so in the 1980s, the Olympic Partner Program was created. The Olympic Partner Program is for typically very large organizations like a Toyota. They pay $200 million for a 4-year affiliation with the Olympics. So it includes, this is called an Olympic cycle of a summer games and a winter games. Why would a company like Toyota want to partner with the Olympic Games? Yeah.
Get their name out around the whole world.
Yes, right? So international appeal, like global context, right? Good. What else? Same halo effect, right? We feel good about, right? The Olympics generally, like we love gymnastics once every 4 years, right? We love track and field once every 4 years, right? We pay attention to ski jumping once every 4 years, right? So it has that same halo effect, and then it has the globalization piece and the diversity of sports, right? So if we're thinking about the Warriors and Chase, right, that's a big audience because that's very captive, right? Very popular, successful, you name it. But it's really for basketball folks, generally, right? In terms of the Olympics, Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics, we can diversify, right? We get people all over interested, or maybe hypothetically interested, at least for a little while, in different sports. Okay, we have Anita DeFrance becomes the first American woman and the first African American woman on the IOC. The Modern Olympic Games restarted or started in 1896. So I have this moment up here to recognize that sports predominantly is run by white men. This is the way it continues to be, right? So it wasn't until the 80s until we get an African American woman on an international governing body that clearly is not, right? That doesn't represent the space in terms of who participates in athletics. Things are changing, right? Things are moving. but it's still a space that is harder for women to break into and harder for people of color to break into. I also want us just to remember, right, the best decisions are made by heterogeneous groups, right? Whether those are groups that are made up of people of different races, ethnicities, genders, religion, what have you, as opposed to the homogeneous group. So it's really important then that we keep trying to keep moving forward in terms of diversifying our leadership in sports. All right, 90s. So the first Summer X Games and the American Association of Adapted Sports Programs were founded. So I have this here to remind us that sports is growing, right, in terms of interest, in terms of organization, right? The X Games were started by primarily younger men who were interested in action sports, who were just done with baseball, right? They were done with football. They were done with basketball. They're like, these sports don't really speak to me anymore, right? So then they did skateboarding and snowboarding and all the action sports that we know of and sort of codified in the X Games. The American Association of Adapted Sports, right, one of the first organizations to recognize that individuals with disabilities actually do play sports, right? They should play sports and should have some organization and support around it. Okay, in the 1990s we have Disney's Wide World of Sports open. Has anybody been to this? This is in Orlando, Disney's Wide World of Sports at all. Not so much. Okay, anybody heard of it? At all. Okay, so let me tell you about it a little bit. This is in Orlando. Who owns Orlando? Anybody know? Disney. Disney owns Orlando, right? They own so much land. They own so much land in Orlando. So they take the big chunk of their land and they have opened a giant sporting complex, like huge, like softball fields, baseball fields, track and fields, basketball arenas. I went down there and they hosted a Disney marathon, right? So just a huge, enormous sporting complex. Why would Disney, in the business of magic, princesses, entertainment, why would they kind of break into the sports? Yes. To make more money, yes, absolutely. Why sports though, and why not, I don't know, like another movie?
It's like what everyone likes to watch is sports. It's like majority worldwide.
Okay, good, so super popular, lots of people watching it, and lots of people doing it also, right? So, if you can imagine, right, soccer was my sport, there were 22 players on the field, right? We're hosting adult tournaments, we're mostly targeting kids though. So let's take a team of U12 soccer players, right, down for a tournament. So we have 22 players on the field for this U12, right? They're not playing just, you know, again, right, one game, right? They're gonna go down for a big tournament. So all of a sudden then we have a tournament, let's say with, I don't know, 20 teams. So 20 times 22. Is the 12-year-old traveling to Orlando by themselves? Probably not, right? They need some coaches, right, at a minimum, probably parents, maybe grandparents, maybe siblings, right? So bringing in, right, more and more people, more revenue, and then what do you think they're doing on their off day? Going to Disney, right? So then we have some kind of cross-branding, right? So they're bringing in even more people into their kind of central product through sports. Okay, 2000s. UN proclaimed 2005 the International Year of Sport and Physical Education, sort of going on the theme of a recognition of the importance of sport, of physical activity for global health. Next, example from the 2000s, the NFL Cowboy Stadium opened at $1.2 billion. Again, that's nothing compared to 1.8 for the Raiders at this point, right? And the Yankees' new stadium opened at $2.3 billion. So I have that there again to kind of show the magnitude of the money being put into sports, but also to illustrate changes over times in terms of facilities, right? So one of the reasons the Raiders left is why? What were they doing? What were the Raiders and the A's doing at the Coliseum that nobody else was doing? Sharing a stadium, right? The A's Raiders were the last cohabitants of one facility. Right? And this is like just not done anymore, right? What are we doing now? We are building new, bigger, and better facilities. So in the 70s, in terms of facility management, a lot of stadiums were built out in the suburbs, right? This is where people were, this is where there's lots of land, so here's a stadium surrounded by parking lots. Lots of multi-use facilities. The trend now, again, something we would talk about in something like a facility and event management class, is putting facilities where? Out in the suburbs or where? Yeah, downtown, and making that arena facility ideally kind of a destination, right? A urban kind of revitalization. And this is one of the reasons, right? Oakland has had such a hard time getting money for a new facility. Is it, where are we gonna put it? Are we really gonna rehabilitate or bring new business to Oakland, to these different, right? It was supposed to be at Laney College, now it's at the Howard Terminal. Or are you really taking money away from other places and spaces that Oakland needs, right? What is actually gonna be the long-term impact of these facilities? This is called the facility arms race, and we see this at colleges as well. Colleges and universities building new and better facilities to try to attract better and better recruits and athletes, because the thinking is, right, if we have new and better recruits, athletes will win more, which leads to more money, which leads to more recruits, right? And so the cycle becomes, right, cycle back. This is what we call the facility arms race. Okay, 2010s, we now have more than 400 undergraduate sport management programs, right? So we have gone from 1 to 400 in a fairly short amount of time. So again, recognition of the increased interest in sport management. And then finally, we're actually in the 2020s, right? So what's happening in the 2020s besides COVID, right? Which have lots of different and varying impacts on the sports industry. Explosion of corporate and media interest in women's sports, right? A lot of people, a lot of times have said, this is it, right? This is the year, right? 1996 was the year of the women in terms of the Olympics. We had soccer, gymnastics, basketball. I think 2 other teams won national gold medals for the United States. All right, 1996, but we know, right? We know that the WNBA is not as popular as the NBA. We know that the NWSL, the Professional Soccer League, right? We're on iteration 3, right? So we had the first time WUSA for 3 years, then we had the WPS for 3 years, and now we have the NWSL, which is in its, I don't even know, 10 years-ish. It's been around for a little bit, right? So we're growing. Media bids just went out for the, oh my gosh, what was it? The World Cup? Women's World Cup? Shoot, now I can't remember which mega event, let's just roll with the Women's World Cup. I cannot remember which women's sporting event it was. Basically, open call for bids, right? ESPN, how much are you gonna pay for us to broadcast this? CBS, NBC. The organizing committee rejected all of them. Right? Like, you are undervaluing women's sports, right? So we're finally, I think, maybe feeling optimistic about where we're going in terms of women's sports. And then the other is the NCAA and the name, image, and likeness legislation that's changed as of July of last year. Anyone want to take a stab at explaining that NIL to us a little bit? Maybe you have experience yourself, name, image, and likeness? Familiar? Yes.
I'm not 100% sure, but does it have to do, like, when you join a team, you're giving them the rights to, like, use your name and advertising, like, your image and just you as a person, because you're now part of that team?
Yes. And that's exactly what's changed, right? So pre-July 2021, as a student athlete, you go to a school, you can no longer individually profit from your name, image, and likeness, no matter how successful you are, right? You think of the biggest college athlete you can, we're not able to, right, while they're a college student athlete, to profit off of that. As of July 2021, that's changed, right? We have student athletes all over the country getting what are called the NIL deals. So people can, right, partner with Paige Buccaneers from UConn, right? She signed with Gatorade. So she basically has an individual sponsorship with Gatorade, so she's getting money, right? I don't know how much money she's getting, right? Thousands of dollars, right, to promote Gatorade. So we have college athletes now being able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness, and it's totally shifting slowly and in big ways the landscape of college athletics. So that's something else kind of on the radar for the 2020s. Questions? Okay, with me so far. All right, let's look at career opportunities in sport and recreation management. Okay, so I'm gonna throw a whole bunch of career opportunities up here, talk about just a few, but again, with my takeaway that clearly all the careers are not represented up here. And again, there are so many different ways to enter into the industry depending on what you're good at, what you're interested in, and what you wanna do. Okay, so the first sort of category is what we would call single sports and college sports, right? So this is college sports, professional sports. Again, I've said this a couple times, but when we think of sport management, we think of sports, right? We think of college and pro because that's where the media attention is. And you can, right, in fact, have a super meaningful career working at a college, right, or with a team. You could also, though, think about working at a conference level. So St. Mary's is in the WCC. The WCC is located in San Bruno, right? So we could have, for example, somebody who works for the St. Mary's Athletic Department. They could also work at the conference level, or, right, you could work for the NCAA. Similarly to pro, right? You could work for the Warriors. You could also work for the NBA, right? So there's different levels to engage with college and professional sports. Okay, the next category is called multi-sports. It's super broad in the sense that it includes everything from something like an adapted sports organization. The Northern California Special Olympics is located near here, and I don't recall which city it's in at the moment. Community-based sports like a YMCA, Police Athletic League, Catholic Youth Organization, those are all within this multi-sport category. Working in high school sports, membership-based would be something like a 24-hour fitness, working for a state's game organization, working for Olympic organization, right, moving to Colorado Springs and working for the USOC, or working for a national governing body, wherever they might be headquartered. All right, media is another huge category, right? Huge. You could, right, work for the internet. I should probably change that. That's not very specific. You could work for newspapers. I feel like that's kind of a hard industry to get into, but still very important. Magazines and directories, radio, television, and in particular, right, social media, right? Not a surprise, right, that there's space in social media now that didn't exist even a few years ago. More and more teams, more and more leagues are doing broadcasting and streaming through social media, right, through Facebook, and through other areas, so that space of social media is kind of changing in terms of its dynamic. I will say this too, and I say this all the time, right? People probably my age and older should not be doing social media, right? We are not digital natives. As much as I might use it or not, like I just don't know it in the way that anybody younger than me does. And so sports organizations, right, are run by people who are, right, older than I am, who don't have these skills. So there's a big hole in the industry that is ready to be filled by people who know how to use social media, right? And knowing how to use social media for a personal perspective is very different from a business perspective, but the translation can happen much more easily for somebody who's grown up using it as opposed to somebody who's like coming in a little bit later, like somebody like me. Okay, the next category is fairly large and diverse as well. We would call this professional services. So sports agents, sports attorneys, anybody doing consulting, working particularly with endorsements, sponsorships is up there. So you might think about working for a company like, well, Pepsi's not a great example anymore because they don't have the rights to the Super Bowl, right? But you could work for Pepsi, and actually your main partner is you could be in charge of the Super Bowl halftime show. So you can work for, right, a non-sports organization, but still be kind of working in sports from that perspective. Sport analytics is up there. This is another huge hole in our industry. For those of you who have maybe read the book Moneyball, seen the movie Moneyball, yes, with Brad Pitt. It's kind of getting old at this point, right? But Moneyball started in Oakland. This idea of sabermetrics in baseball, right, is still, right, young and in its infancy in terms of how teams are using this and leagues are using this in terms of player performance. So baseball, right, is a little bit, many baseball teams are ahead of the curve, but the NBA, the NHL are more and more using the sport analytics. So another hole in the industry if you have interest in data at all. We also use sport analytics for things like social media and ticketing. So for social media, right, let's see what gets the most likes. When are these posts actually read, right? Doing that type of analysis, say, is it actually the best today, like a Wednesday at 9 a.m. to release a social media post, or does it get more likes or clicks at Wednesday at 12 p.m., right? Those types of things go into decisions related to the analytics, but also in this case, the social media. Okay, facilities, right? So thinking about facilities as a whole and potentially becoming a specialist in a certain type of facility. I'd last week a graduate from St. Mary's who works for the Raiders, and she's a director of operations in relation to everything the Raiders do at our new facility. So she's really intimately involved in managing the facility itself when the Raiders are playing. So that's an example of kind of a facility expertise. If you're interested in aquatics, right, that obviously requires a lot of advanced knowledge about chemicals and everything else that you would want to and need to deal with in aquatics. Equestrian downs, right, racetracks, right, specialized knowledge, golf courses, turf management, all these things you can become really specialized in and find a place for yourself in the industry. And then finally are manufacturers and retailers. So thinking about equipment and product manufacturers, like a Nike, like an Under Armour, like an Adidas. And if you're interested in these particular spaces, you gotta get yourself up to Portland, right? Because we have Nike International Headquarters is in Beaverton. Adidas has its North American headquarters in Portland, and Under Armour has one of its headquarters up there as well. There's a really cool graduate degree at Portland State that's focused on sport product development, actually. So that's a really neat place to be right now in terms of equipment and retail. Restaurants though, if you're into an ESPN zone, a sports bar, right, those types of spaces are also included in our manufacturers and retailers. Okay. What up here surprises you in terms of being in the sports industry? And I certainly didn't go through everything or give you examples of everything, but what's one thing that maybe you hadn't thought about or considered as part of the sports industry?
Medicine.
Say it again?
Medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even mention that, right? So some of you might be interested in, right, the exercise science part, right? The how the human body works. Absolutely, right? That would be included, right? It's not necessarily the business side, it's more human athletic performance and prevention, but it absolutely is included for the industry. Good. What else? Yeah.
You mentioned restaurants.
Yeah. Right, it's there. Good. What else?
I think it's interesting all the interplay, because you could like to do like the analytic stuff, and you can do the sports med, you can do the performance,
Yes.
you can do the fan stuff, you can
Yeah.
do the money side of things. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of transferable skills across. Yeah. Good. I forgot to mention one of my favorite up here, and then we'll go on to the next slide, but is transportation. Right, when I was at Ohio State, I had a student who every year would go to wherever the Super Bowl was, and his like area of expertise was working for a transportation company that was in charge of transporting the players' families to the game. Right, this was not a full-time job for him, right? But like a specific area of transportation, right? If you're playing in the Super Bowl, right, the last thing you as a player want to be worried about is your family, right? And if you're the family of a player, the last thing you want to worry about is how are you going to get through traffic to the game, right? So those are kind of examples of the little nuances of how we get things to work in terms of the business of sports and finding a space that we might find. Okay, so let's think about kind of educational pathways. Say most folks who work in the sports business industry do have a bachelor's degree, and we'll talk a little bit just in a few seconds about a graduate degree, but do have a bachelor's degree. I pulled out just in terms of interest, these are all the undergraduate institutions in California, Oregon, and Washington that have a degree in sport management. So some of these degrees are Bachelor of Arts, some are Bachelor of Science, some are housed in a school of business, some are housed in a Department of Kinesiology, some might have an emphasis in recreation, some might have an emphasis or a lot of overlap with our exercise science colleagues doing kind of anatomy and physiology in kind of a strange way, in my opinion, a little bit, right? Because on the business side, we don't necessarily care about how the human body works, right? But anyway, so there's a lot of kind of different varieties that you might find when you're looking for a four-year degree in terms of sport management. Okay, most importantly, clearly missing, of course, is St. Mary's, right? So at St. Mary's, we do have a bachelor's degree. It's within kinesiology, but it's in sport management. And ours is a BA program. So students at St. Mary's start with a set of lower division requirements probably many of which you all are doing here at DVC or could do at DVC. An intro to kinesiology, a research methods class, intro to sport management, accounting, and econ, right? So giving folks kind of this base in the business side of sports as opposed to, right, exercise science colleagues who are doing bio and chem. We have our students do sports psychology in order to understand motivation, teams, and how that perspective kind of works. It's a little bit overlap with our exercise science colleagues, but it's a really important topic area. Then we have what I call pick your own adventure in terms of some of our socio-historical cultural understanding. So you could pick a sport history class if that interests you, sport sociology, so thinking about gender, race, class in relation to sport. You could choose our sport and social justice class or a women in sport class. Those kind of your choose your own adventure. We have our students take a couple of classes from our business school, so a class on managing and leading organizations and a specific class in sport economics. And then we have a group of 4 classes over here within our department, a facility and event management class, so a functional area of sport management that deserves its own kind of content area, sports law class, sports marketing, and then an internship class. So we have our students do an internship as part of their graduation requirements. And those internships can be wherever, right? If you think you're interested in working in college sports, then we would want you to get an internship in college sports. If you think you want to work in media, we would want you to get an internship in media, right? It's really kind of, again, what do you think is going to be really interesting to you and meaningful to you? Questions? All right, let's look then a little bit more at different types of education. So the first, I was thinking about internships. What is the purpose of an internship? Yeah.
To gain experience.
Yeah, absolutely, to gain experience. Why would that be important?
Transferable skills.
Yeah, transferable skills, good. What else? What else are other purposes of an internship? Yeah.
It can open doors for you in the future, like whether you're an intern for somebody who works for a big company or for a team, like potentially you could work like with them side by side or work for another company.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's that networking piece that internships get you, right? Part of it too is what we say is merging practice with theory, right? So in the classroom, you're learning about leadership, right? And then you're in your internship and you are in a leadership position or you're taking a leadership role in a team. Does what you learned in class translate here? Or is it just like real different and not good different or bad different, or maybe it's better, it's just different, right? So part of it is, what do we learn in class and then what does that look like in the real world? Like what type of experiences can we have? Something really important, at least to me to know about, for you to know about internships, and maybe you already do, is that internships, right, can kind of solidify your interests. Like, yes, I definitely want to be in college sports. Yes, I definitely want to be in high school sports. They can also equally say, no, I don't want to work in college sports, or no, I don't want to work in high school sports. And that's okay, right? Because knowing what you don't want to do is equally as important as knowing what you want to do. I have one of our top graduating students 7 years ago or so now. He was going the pro route, right? He did part-time job with the Raiders, part-time job with San Francisco summer job with the San Francisco Junior Giants, right? So pro, and then he just came to this realization, was like, I do not like this, right? He did not like kind of the corporate, here to make money kind of aspect. He is now working at Orinda City Parks and Rec, right? So he's in the park and rec world, and he's coaching AAU basketball, and he's loving it, right? So he's kind of mirroring these two things, the coaching and then working at City Parks and Rec, right? Those things are really different than working in professional sports. So places you might think about doing an internship, right? In the Bay Area, clearly we are spoiled in terms of places where you could intern. We have students at St. Mary's, right, who intern for our own athletic department, right? We have D1 athletics, so it provides a unique opportunity for internships for our own students and for others. Cal, right, is in our backyard as well. We have a great, for example, just a partnership with their rec sports program, which is huge, right? So there's a lot of the size different, the size and scale of their rec sports department is much different than at a smaller school like St. Mary's. Giants, Warriors, the A's at least for now. NBC Bay Area Sports, the Ultimate Field House, right? Just examples of locations where you might, again, get your feet wet. And in terms of internships, whether it's for credit or for not, I encourage you to do as many as you can, paid, unpaid, whatever, right? The more experience, the better, in terms of entering into the sports industry. Questions about internships at all? So a little bit about grad school. So, right, the purpose of grad school is to go in depth in an area that you are ready to know more about, right? I think, and I'm gonna give you a caveat, right? Ideally, when you get to grad school, you know what you wanna do, at least to a certain degree, or the industry that you want to be in. That being, right, so you can get the most of it. That being said, I did not know I wanted to do, right? When I went to Iowa State to get my master's degree, I was just like, I wanna do this thing, like, maybe it'll help me do something, right? So, I'm not the best case study for this, but once you get to grad school, for example, in sport management, you have the opportunity to take more classes, different classes that really relate to sport and best prepare you to enter the sports industry. So in terms of different program types you might find, and in terms of entering into the sports industry, it depends on what level at which you work or find yourself. That determines the degree expectation. So more and more athletic directors at big schools are requiring a PhD, for example, or an EDD, an educational doctorate. Sort of the associate level, assistant level, more and more, and colleges are requiring master's degree. Not right away, but eventually along the way. So we have Masters of Arts, Masters of Science. An MBA is a business degree. University of Oregon has a really unique program where you can do an MBA and focus on sports, for example. I actually think you can get a joint master's degree and the MBA at the same time. So there's some really cool programs out there that are using sport in different ways. And then PhDs, again, typically somebody who wants to work in the academy in some way, teaching, or again, going all the way up to the top of a big school and being an athletic director. Okay, I want to just get your ear used to the idea of graduate assistantships. So in lots of industries, or graduate schools, law school, social work, MBAs, these things like don't exist. In sport management, sport rec, they do. So the idea of a graduate assistantship, depending on kind of the size and scope, is that you as a graduate student are paid monthly to teach, to do research, to do some sort of other kind of administrative support for somebody at the university. So you're getting a monthly stipend and you're getting tuition paid for. Ideally all of it, maybe some of it, depending on part-time or not. And getting experience. So I was at Ohio State for 5 years. I left with some debt, but not that much, remarkably, for being at a school for 5 years because I had graduate assistantship. So I had about $1,000 a month. Doesn't sound a lot. Remember, I was in Columbus, Ohio, where cost of living is 50% less expensive than it is here. So that $1,000 went pretty far. My tuition was paid for, right? And I got to do teaching. So I have sort of all of these things leading to my career. And again, these things don't exist for all types of graduate degrees, but you can in fact get your graduate degree paid for in sport management. Okay, so let's look at some characteristics of careers in the sports industry. Let's see. Okay, things to consider as you're kind of, where do you find yourself, right? Clearly there's lots of different spaces within the industry to enter. One of the things you want to think about is the work schedule. When are athletic contests typically played? Night and on weekends, right? So if you are out, right, you're like, I am not working at night and I'm not working on the weekends, well, right, you could probably cross out a bunch of careers in the sports industry off your list. And that's fine, right? You might still, for example, work in student athlete support services, which is more of a 9-to-5 job, right? Still within the college space, right? There's lots of different spaces. But if you're interested, right, in the pro, in the college, you just have to keep that in mind. And also knowing that things and expectations might change over time. Something that's perfect in your 20s, right? I'm there all night, all the time, you know, long days, long hours might not be ideally what you want to be doing in your 30s or your 40s or later, right? So part of this is maybe a long-term vision if you have it. The next is that job location is normal, is expected, and can be really helpful, right? So we are in the Bay Area. We love to be in the Bay Area, right? There's lots of wonderful things about the Bay Area. It's hard to leave the Bay Area if you want to work for a Bay Area team or college. But if we don't sort of open the door to moving somewhere else, we're gonna miss out on opportunities that might allow us to advance perhaps in a particular organization. So could you, for example, see yourself moving to Ohio, the middle of Ohio for a year or 2 years, working for a minor league baseball team where you get to wear a bunch of different hats, you get tons of different experience, and that then better positions you to come back to the Bay Area or move to a space that you might think is more desirable in the middle of Ohio. Not that the middle of Ohio is not desirable. Point being, right, the ability to move and go to different organizations, right, you expand your experience and you expand your network. Okay, size and scope, I have not mentioned this yet. Just keep in mind what size and scope looks like. So if we're taking a high school sports, a college sports, professional sport, the size and scope matters. Anybody go to a high school with more than 2,000 people? How about less than 500 people? No, yes, right? So if we're at a small school, or if we're at a big school, those experiences working in athletics fundamentally look different. Right, so at our smaller high schools, or maybe even the middle high schools, the athletic director, right, might also be the coach, and might also be a teacher, right? Once we get to our bigger high schools, let's take something like De La Salle, right, you're gonna have one athletic director, probably. So depending on what you want your experience to look like, you could find yourself at different size schools. Same with a college, right? You come to someplace like St. Mary's, where we are a teeny tiny Division I, you're gonna do a little bit of everything, even if you're in marketing, right? Because there's one person in marketing, and so you're gonna market all the sports, right? You go to Ohio State, where there's 60,000 students, right? And they have 36 sports, you are probably gonna work marketing the football team, right? And maybe you're one or two of 3 people marketing football as opposed to everything else. It's just a fundamentally different experience. So depending, again, what you like. Do you like the variety? Do you like interacting with students? Probably being in a smaller space is a better decision as opposed to a bigger space. Same with pro leagues, right? The NFL is the biggest of the big. And what about a small, right? There's a new professional pickleball league, right? Have you seen this? All the celebrities are buying in. Tom Brady has a new professional, he bought into a team, right? That's gonna be a small league for a little bit until it, right, has time and space to grow. So just something to consider. And then finally, is how do you get those jobs in the sports management industry? It's networking and experience, networking experience, networking experience, right? It's not just what you know and who you know, but it's also who knows you, right? So in all of those different experiences, your internships, your classes, when you have guest speakers, whatever it happens to be, right? Make the most of those. Those are your new connections, right? Your student colleagues are your connections, right? We might have the next GM of whatever, right, sitting right in our room. We say, we knew that guy when he was at DVC, right? So those types of connections are what allow people into the sports industry, as like through the door often, and then to kind of advance in terms of careers. All right, you're gonna watch sports all the time, you might as well get paid to do so. Okay, I am going to skip kind of these research trends and industry trends, and then we'll go. Here they are. Okay, questions? What else do you want to know that I didn't talk about? About the sports industry? Yeah.
Can you just explain what like a research assistantship would look like for sports management?
Yeah, absolutely, good question. So we have faculty, typically they're faculty at, and I didn't mention this, but there are a lot more sport management programs in the Midwest and on the East and the Southeast than there are on the West Coast. It's just how it is. So so you could move to Ohio, you could go to Ohio State, you could work with a professor there who is researching fan behavior, right? Maybe that professor is interested in knowing, after a win, this is a research study that was done a long time ago, after a win, are people more likely to wear the gear of the team than not, right? So they might have that research question as you as a research assistant would help kind of do the research, analyze it, write it up. Other questions? Okay. leave it at that. Thank you for having me. Let me know if you do have questions about sport management, St. Mary's, or anything else. Thank you for coming.
So before you leave, just wanted to kind of get a quick question. How many of you are here from the business side? Okay, so everyone here is sports management. Online class? Who's in the online class with me? Okay, a couple of interns. So, what do you major? Nice. What class are Kines? So you guys in Mike's class? No. What class are you guys taking right now this semester?
Mullins.
Coach Mullins? Nice. Well, thank you, Professor Williams. Thank you for taking us on this sports management journey. A token of our appreciation, just
Thank you.
a small.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you all for coming today. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me. Shoot Coach Mullins or whoever else your instructor is. Get it to me, and then after we'll help you how we can. Thank you.
I also want to make you aware of the space you're in. This is the Science and Health Student Center. We're open 9 to 6 Monday through Thursday, 9 to 4 on Fridays. Come here to study. We have weekly presenters like this great presentation you just had. We have tutors in all various subject areas. We have instructors holding office hours. We have snacks. We have games. So enjoy the space.
Thank you, everybody.